start with today's session about GCP and Microsoft Azure. So it's me, Aman Sharma, and this is the last day I'm speaking with you in web hosting course. Some of you might be taking this more coming courses that we'll be doing, and I'll be really happy to again be part in this knowledge sharing and share as much as my knowledge to you, and that would help you, do better things. So what we are trying to do, I have talked with my team, and we'll be starting an internship drive project in which we'll be connecting with industrial internship programs and also the people who have graduated from our courses. So all the people, I want to congratulate you already that you have survived with us for the last 7 days. So we'll be creating a hall of fame, and we'll be putting your name in that hall of fame. And whenever we have a new internship or recruitment drive, you all will be getting notifications for that, and you will be given preferences and the recommendation from my end to join that internship process. So good luck with that. I will make sure that you get appropriate documentation. It would take us 3 and 4 more days to set those things up, and once that is done, I'll make sure that you land on the best position as possible. And even if we have more programs coming from Google or Microsoft, I'll be making sure that you are the first one to know about them. So that's a small promise from me. So today's agenda is simple. We'll be talking about Google Cloud platform and how you can do hosting with it. I'll not talk about again all the services that it provides, because there are a lot of services, but I'll talk about the most important one, most popular one that can help you get started with a cloud platform. And the next one is Microsoft Azure hosting. Again, there are a lot of services that enterprise use. You won't need to use it maybe even in your lifetime, but I'll be telling you about the most important ones so that you have a basic knowledge about, beginner knowledge of that goes to cloud platform. So first of all, like Google Cloud came into existence in around 2013 mostly. Before that, they were doing it, but mostly for enterprise. But they start seeing that there is a huge trend in providing platform as a service, infrastructure as a service platform. So Google has already a credibility of providing a long range of products across YouTube, Gmail, Google search, obviously, and also provides API on Google Maps and all that. So they thought, why not give a platform to the developers which has the same skill set and tools that Google itself uses. So they expanded their internal servers, data centers for public use, and then they started Google Cloud Platform. So the major difference between Google Cloud and any other cloud provider is that it runs on the same infrastructure where Google runs its own services. In other cases, for example, it's not sure that Outlook will be running on the same Microsoft Azure. Most probably it would be, but they don't promise this thing. But Google Cloud is exactly whatever innovation they are doing with their own products, they are applying it to Google Cloud also. Also, Google Cloud is the only company that has its own intranet. What it means that they have their own fiber optic cable. When we were discussing how does internet works, so we were discussing about fiber optic cable. So Google Cloud has its own fiber optic cable across market. This makes the redundancy, the speed of the platform very fast, but at the same time it makes it a little bit expensive. So for beginners project who are just trying to host a web application, they don't prefer it like largely, but enterprise grade application where speed, redundancy, reliability, all the compliances matter a lot, people go with Google Cloud. So I'm not here to actually compare both of these services, and nor I'm kind of affiliated with Google Cloud anyway. So it is not endorsement. This is just for educational purpose, and the final decision is always yours. So it's no harm to learn these services. You will never know where you have to apply them, right? So to just quickly see the overall ground of what Google Cloud provides, these are the plethora of services. So basically, they have divided them into 4 parts. One is ingestions, one is storage, one is processing, and one is explore. So overall, if you see this thing, this is more aligned with data analytics and data science jobs, but they nowhere say that you can't host a simple web application on that. So let's go into a little bit detail and see what these services are. And if you see, App Engine is the most popular service these days. Let me change it to my pen. Yep. So App Service is the most popular service these days on Google Cloud. We'll talk about that shortly. So this is like a full stack application holder where you can do anything, and then Cloud Function is same as AWS Lambda, which is a serverless way of executing services. Then Cloud Storage is a simple static storage, and this is now a trend that every cloud service provides static storage. Then you have Cloud SQL, which is a SQL format. BigQuery is the NoSQL format, and same with the Bigtable, that it's a big data warehouse. Then you have Processing Analyze, again BigQuery is there, and yeah, I think these are the most important services. So let's go ahead and check each one of them one by one. So to get started, I'll just go to my browser, and let's see if I have Google Cloud. Yeah, so if you are beginning with Google Cloud, they provide you a $300 credits for 1 year or so. and you can do that. You can buy it. Like you have to enter your credit card details, and they don't charge anything. Even if you end out of credits, they will give you a warning. But still, it's suitable that whenever you are not working around with things, just disable the service. So right now you can see I have 360 these credits for next 365 days, and it's not a full access. Some of these things are just on running on trial, but let's see and go ahead and see what the console looks like. So this is how the console actually looks like, a little bit different than how AWS was looking like. And you have a search bar on top. You can search anything from here. That's a good handy feature. And then there is a active Cloud Shell terminal from which you can write your own CLI commands directly without putting any effort of logging with SSH and everything. So this is a pretty easy thing that I haven't seen much with any other cloud provider, that a direct console to control all services. Then on dashboard, they give you, so everything on Google Cloud Platform runs on project basis. So you can create your own organizations first of all, and then every organization can run on different projects. So these are small dots. If you see, these are projects, and the buildings blocks that you see are the organizations. There can be different projects under different organizations, and you can have different organizations. It's just way of managing and organizing your project overall over here. And here you can change your password, stuff like that. Yeah, you need a Gmail ID to use Google Cloud. That is one of the drawbacks that I don't like about Google Cloud. So you cannot use if you don't have a Gmail ID. Apart from other services that provides control with all the services. So it provides you a glance view of what things are running, what APIs are running, and things like that. So let's go ahead and see what is on the table. Yeah, so we have billing and IAM. So billing and IAM, billing means how you manage your bills and how you manage your payment systems, and IAM means identity access management. We learned IAM in AWS also, and the same is the case with IAM over here. So you, in the IAM section, you can create different people. You can create service accounts which have permissions to different services if you're working with a team of different people, and you can add them and then give them different permission rights. That's pretty easy from here. So in IAM also you can get a glance view of different people who are available. Right now you can see that we have multiple people and everybody has a different role. You can assign role based on the organization and also based on the project they are working on. So that's pretty flexible, very easy to do, nothing much to learn over here. So next is the billing section where you can manage your bill. You have to create a link bill account. I won't do that because that will start charging my organization. And so it's just like go over here, you add your credit card, and that's it. It just works like that. And also in billing, you can manage your expense. You can set alerts based on budgets when you hit a particular spot, and you can have prepaid payments if you want. You can also run on postpaid payments. They have both kind of things. You can sign a retainership, which gives you a little bit more discounts as compared to the other one, but that's more of business angle. Let's just keep our set postings. So then the basic thing that any cloud platform provides is its computation power. So in case of AWS, we saw that they have EC2, Elastic Cloud Compute. In DigitalOcean, we had Droplets, and in Google Cloud, we have Compute Engine. So Compute Engine is driven by the same infrastructure which is used by Google services like Google Search, Gmail, YouTube, and everything is virtualized. Again, there is one single Google Cloud entity based on different regions where they are spread across different geographical locations. And then they provide you a containerized small virtual space where you can run your application. So if you remember, this is how the cloud actually works. You have a full domain of services, and they provide you a virtualized container where you can run your application. And then when you are, whenever you are, in demand, high demand, you can scale it, and when you are not, you can scale it down. But on an individual level, you will feel like that it's your independent machine, and you can control all the variables that you want. So every virtual machines that is running can be configured for its disk, network, firewall, etc. that you see over here. So if you want to launch your own compute engine, you just need to do the compute part, and then you see the compute engine over here. So VM is virtual machine, and you can launch your own virtual machine, and it's up to you if you want to create a new one, or you can import settings from the old one. So when you create a new instance, the first thing it gives you is which region you have to choose. So again, everything is region dependent. It's always recommended to keep the region nearest to your actual use of application. Then you can have machine learning family, like if you want to optimize your machine to the virtual machine to actually scale and decrease. So that's the kind of handy feature that Google Cloud provides. It automatically predicts when your demand is going to be high, and it increases the standards according to that. But if you are not fond of that, just keep it to general purpose and set it to whatever computation do you think you will need actually. Then you can attach a bootable disk. Small hard disk is always handy to keep everything on like two things, and just then hit create. It will roll down a VM for you, and then you can also install different VMs, different operating systems. So for example, by default, it offers Debian, GNU, Linux, If you can't see, let me zoom in a little bit. Yep. And you can change it, and they have different level of operating systems over here. You can choose any one of them. So let's see which of them are not available. Windows is available. Ubuntu is also available. Kali is not available. Red Hat is available. CentOS is also available. So mostly all of them. And then if you want, you can also upload your own custom image. The ISO file that you use as a bootable disk, that is also possible over here. So same like how Oracle or VM VirtualBox that you run on your Windows, it is like the same thing. You just configure it in the same way, and then you launch the VM. It's ready to go and ready to launch. In the marketplace, you can also buy VMs if you want to go for a purchase license. Let's see if they have macOS. For sure. No, I don't think so. They have macOS. But if you still want macOS, so I think the best way to do is just download the ISO from any of the sources and then upload the ISO over here. You'll be ready to go and create your own virtual machines. So when you create virtual machine, you want me to create a, so let's create one. Yep. So now you can see our instance is getting launched, and everything is going as smooth. And when you have launched your VM, every VM will be available over here. You can drive, they will also give you an external IP address, which will help you to see and control your domain over here. If you want, you can attach your custom domain. I will tell you about how you can attach your own custom domain. But for now, our VM is running on the central location. Yeah, you will notice that it is fast because they are not booting any new operating system for us. They are just creating a shared resource for us. So that's pretty fast. That's called cloud containerization. And that is different from how a virtual private server works. So yeah, I think it will take a little bit of time to reach out this thing. But when it's done, you will be able to hit the external IP and you'll be able to see all what is going on with this VM. So next one on the list is App Engine. So App Engine is a managed service. So next one on the list is Google App Engine, and this is the most popular Google Cloud service right now. So it is built on top of any compute engine. And the difference between compute engine and app engine is that app engine is totally managed by Google. You don't need to care about anything. You just launch a service and it's ready to go. Same as DigitalOcean Droplet. So they have simplified the way how you actually create the things. And if I go inside, here is the app engine that you need to release. So app engine are based on different full stack applications that we are creating. The difference between compute engine and app engine, if I want to explain you again. So a compute engine comes with a operating system like Ubuntu, Linux, and things like that. But the app engine comes with application environment, PHP, Apache, Nginx, and all those things. So that is the difference. It is like a managed service for you. So for beginners developer who don't know much about cloud and how operating system works, I don't know much about command line. So you can use App Engine to actually do those things. So when we go, obviously the first thing it will ask us to choose the region. And if we are in India, I don't know what is, I think this one is, and they have a server again in Mumbai. They have two servers, I think, South one and Southeast one maybe. Let me see. I'm not sure. I think they are going to release another server in Bangalore soon, but right now they only have in Mumbai. So when you create an app engine, you can choose the language that you want to choose from here. So basically it's running on only two frameworks, Python and JavaScript, but then you can have different environments and you can choose for languages that you are going to execute on top of these Python and JavaScript frameworks. So pretty handy features. For example, if you are running a React app or a Node.js server, you would probably go with Node.js. If you are going to host WordPress, you will go with PHP, right? So then you choose for environment, you want a standard or flexible environment. The difference between standard and flexible is with standard, you choose how much RAM and computation you need in once. Then you cannot increase it later. The benefit, it is a discounted price for you. It's very manageable. But in flexible, you can increase the usage when your usage grows. But the downside, that it's a little bit expensive rather than how the standard prices work. So for this demo, we'll go with standard one. Click on next. Then you can deploy with Google Cloud SDK. This is a fancy way of saying how you can do this thing if you want to deploy your app directly from your IDE directly to Google Cloud. But in this case, I don't have any app right now, so I'll just skip this step. You can also, fetch it from GitHub. You can just like Google it on it. You can add the CLI and pull all the GitHub repo, the same that we were doing with cPanel. So you can do that way also. So yeah, we have a problem. I don't know why. Let me quickly reload it. Confusing. Yep, and everything that you are doing right now, you can see all the activities over here inside the alarm notifications banner, so that you don't need to wait about that. So let's go ahead and click on this notification so that, yeah. So this is our app engine that is running right now. Then I told you about that app engine is also running on top of a compute engine. So that's why you can see the instance getting a little bit hot on this point. So the next step will obviously for us will be to go inside app engine, choose for that service. I don't know why it's saying this again and again. Project is right. It also says that it's deployed, and then it doesn't work. Yeah, and this is just my personal opinion. It's not just to discourage you to use Google Cloud. That there occur some problems while you are doing these things. Like for example, the one that we are doing right now. We are doing all the right steps, but somehow Google Cloud is failing. So I cannot do anything in this step. But obviously, the next way to do it is that you will get the list of App Engine modules that you have just launched. Then you can go inside one of these App Engine, run the CLI, and pull your GitHub repository code over here, and then deploy it with the public IP that it gives. I'm really sorry that I cannot show you the demo because of this failure. And the next one is Cloud Functions. So just to simply explain what Cloud Function is, it is exactly the copy of AWS Lambda that we learned yesterday. So it is a serverless way of executing any command. So you don't care about where it is running, you just write a Cloud Function which runs on normal Python or JavaScript environment, and then it just executes whatever you say. So a common example over there here is you create a new event. This event just goes first of all to the Cloud Function, and the Cloud Function invokes other services that are API level services that you have integrated inside your cloud service. It gets its response from these APIs and then writes it back. Now in this whole process, you didn't include any single compute engine or app engine. So it does that everything on its own. So it's kind of easy to do, kind of easily scalable, serverless fashion, pretty handy things. Then you have cloud storage. Cloud storage is object-based storage. That means just normal C drive or D drive that we saw in AWS S3 and DigitalOcean Spaces. So it's just a static storage for all the media content that we'll create. So if you were wondering in the previous slide that what if we run out of 10 GB space, you attach a cloud storage to it. So that's just a handy feature. Again, to have a cloud function in place, you just go to the compute one. You have cloud function command over here, and just you can create a new cloud function script. I'm not familiar with cloud function and to be honest, but I think it will work same as AWS Lambda. It has its own SDK, and then you can create your own function. Let's go ahead and see if they have any sample functions to execute. Yeah, so I can, yeah, they already have a sample server code, which is index.js file running on Node.js 8. You can change the runtime also. You can also import your code from somewhere, and when it's done, you just hit on create and the function is created. That's how simple it is. So serverless is a cool way if you want to do a small things. We run our serverless on StackPath, that's running on top of AWS itself. So we write everything on JavaScript. In the similar fashion, you can write cloud functions in PHP, in Python, and in JavaScript. Most probably you would like to use JavaScript because of its line-by-line interpretation method, and it's very easy to manage any serverless job. So that's how you release a cloud function, and then you can attach API to it. It will just work like any other cloud functions. And yeah, I forgot almost to tell you about cloud storage. So for cloud storage, we go inside the storage part, and then you will be able to see the storage. You can go inside the storage, and yeah, I already have some cloud storage over here. Then you can create a bucket, just like AWS bucket. You can choose where you want to release this bucket. Let's name it test. Continue. Oh, this is already taken by someone. Mobile test. So you can choose where you want to share, like store your bucket. You can choose just the region, and it automatically picks where it has to store it. You can specifically choose which server you want to store it in. For example, if you want to store in Mumbai and Singapore, wherever you want to do, or you can have dual region, like you can choose to have two regions at the same time, so it stores them on two different hard disks. By the way, even if you choose one region, it will still give you redundancy of 3 drives, so you don't need to care about if one of the server burns, which is hardly any reason, but it would take care about their data, and your data will remain safe. So that's totally fine. For this example, let's go with one location in Mumbai. Yeah, and these are the then default types of storage that it offers. The best one to use is obviously standard. So standard stands for standard, like the easy way to use it. So then they have also divided them into three parts. So first one I would like to tell you about is the archive one. So it's just based on the frequency, how much you use it, and everyone. So one is cheaper than another. So standard one is the most expensive one. You can see the price over here, 0.023 per GB per month. If I go to Nearline, it is 0.016 per GB per month. If I go to Coldline, it's even cheaper, and then Archive is the cheapest. So if you are actively going to use this bucket, then you will use standard. But if you are going to use it infrequently, you will choose for the lower ones. So for this, let's go with standard and continue. Then access control, again, it attacks IAM rule that who can access this bucket or not. Let's continue with that. Then you can add an encryption on top of this thing, and then it will create a bucket for you, a shared storage container. And that bucket you can attach with your cloud compute app engine, whatever you want to use. So when it's created, you can just easily click on bucket, and then everything inside that bucket will be visible to you. I will go into any existing bucket that we have. This is empty. Does any one of them have anything? Yep, here is a CSV file, and it stores everything like a static format, which can be accessed by other Google Cloud services. So if you want to execute anything, this is like your Drive hub where you can store all the files and things like that that will be utilized by other services. Okay, so this I think is the last one. So Cloud SQL, again a managed SQL service. With this, you can have relational database service like MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server hosted on Google Cloud if you are running a database job. So, and that is totally kind of available in the storage region over SQL. So you can release a database over here and create a new instance. I won't do it; it takes a little bit of time. And so you just to kind of tell you in short, it has MySQL, Postgres, and SQL Server. Depends upon your usage. All these are relational database system, and then it will give you an IP address and the credentials to actually access the data from these databases. Okay. Then last one you have is BigQuery. BigQuery is created by Google. It is a non-relational database system, which should be NoSQL, but in BigQuery you can write SQL queries, but inside it stores everything in a non-relational database system. So Google BigQuery is mostly used by analytics tools, so you can import the data from various sources like from Google Sheet, from Facebook to Google Analytics, and then process the data inside BigQuery, and you can visualize it on a simple data studio like Google Data Studio. So let me go inside, and I think I have created something in past on BigQuery. And BigQuery is really fast. Again, you don't need to worry about storage and things like that. Yeah, I have done a lot of queries, and it's really fast how it executes everything on BigQuery. So let's go ahead and run an old query over here. I've just clicked back on the query, and I can open this query in the query editor and hit on run. So this is executing now my query. This is a very big query kind of. And it gives me results like this. So a standard way of how you will actually execute a normal SQL query. So now you can see the way it is executing everything is in a SQL format, but in actual it saves everything inside as a NoSQL format. How actually I got to know about this is that when you see the result, you also have a JSON available. You don't have a direct JSON available for SQL data, but that means they are storing everything in JSON format. Is it possible? It is actually possible to store it like in a non-relational database system. There are no relations. This is like JSON data. And then you can click on Explore on Data Studio. You can see all your data in that fashion. More kind of job for what do you say, a data scientist person, someone like that. And can you host WordPress, which is a MySQL, which requires MySQL database on BigQuery? The answer is no, because WordPress requires total relational database system, and BigQuery is not a relational database system. Even if you write SQL queries, some of the queries that I will write will not directly get executed. So some of these variables were really different. And if you want to just see an example, BigQuery difference SQL. Oh, let's not go on Quora. Opinionated answers. Yeah, so you can see that in legacy SQL we have different kind of data types like record, and they have struct, and some of the queries are also different. This is a standard SQL query, which is select timestamp this from this table. This query returns the following if you run on BigQuery. So these are the syntax difference. So obviously it's not actually like a relational database system, but kind of good for data science people, not to worry about. So the last thing is networking. How do you connect everything so that everything start working? And for that, they have a dedicated system that is called networking. So that is actually visible over here in the left pane. Every services that I was talking about is on the left side. So AWS has it in the full screen, Droplet had it on the right side, but they have in the left side. Everybody has their own UI. So this is a networking part, and to connect all your app engine and compute engine, the VPC network is the place where you do all these things. So in VPC network, you can go inside VPC network, add your domain. So you can see all the services that we created ever are listed over here. So we can create our own VPC network. So we can point a particular address to a different IP that we want. Same as DNS ruling, nothing extra. Just a different way of saying it. You can add subnet records, things like that. You can have routes, how different applications are getting routed to different each another. I never used too much of Google Cloud. It's basically used as an independent service. Nobody hosts a full stack applications. But if you are crazy about, in my next slide, I have given an architecture of how people configure network with Google Cloud and how they actually run these things. Then in firewall rules, you can add firewall rules, handy features to make sure that your application is running smooth. And to finally, you can also add a CDN. What's the name of CDN service? Yeah, Cloud Network, I guess. Cloud CDN, sorry. So Cloud CDN is their CDN service, which you can add on top of it. So if you cannot find anything on left side, just go and search over here CDN. Yeah, so Cloud CDN. And you can add an origin. Origin means the actual service that is running behind the CDN, and then you attach a CDN on top of it so that everything runs on top of CDN. Then you have load balancers that can automatically balance, increase and decrease your application usage. Cloud DNS, domain name system, where you manage your DNS records, A records, CNAME records, MX record, everything goes inside over here. So when you launch it for the first time, everything takes a little bit of time. So you can create a zone, and you can first of all we need to give some kind of name. So let's give it mobile web, then the domain name mobileweb.com. You want DNS security? I don't want it. If you want, you can choose. Yep, so our first name server record is here, and then we can go ahead and add multiple records, even if it's A record, CNAME record, MX record, TXT record. These records we already know about. So everything goes inside Cloud DNS. So the working theory is you add the domain inside Cloud DNS, then you can add a load balancer, how you want to balance the load between different virtual machines, and then the cloud networking VPC helps you direct the traffic to which compute you want to go to. Okay, so this is the working theory. I have never tried it practically, so good luck on that if you are trying it. So this is some sample architectures of how people host applications. So first of all, as we said, every request that is coming from our app will go to the Cloud DNS. This Cloud DNS will take the request, put it to load balancers. So load balancers can choose if you want to go with the compute A or compute B. And then whenever the service is executed, all the strings are stored on cloud storage, and then the dynamic content is on Cloud SQL, which are SQL engines. So this is how you can have a content management system. So WordPress also pretty much works around that. This can be the place where our WordPress code is executing. This can be our MySQL database, and this can be our WP upload folder where everything is uploaded. So one way to do it. Another way to do it is, first of all, your app comes, you can directly attach a Google load balancer, which is same as Cloud load balancing system. Then you have an app engine on top of it, where you have your own front-end code, and this front-end code is actually getting assets from the cloud storage. I will talk about Memcache later. So you can have the data from cloud storage, then the backend is coming from Cloud SQL or Cloud Store, whatever you want to use. And then there are different task queues. Task queues is a fancy way of executing things in a stack format, in a queue format, where everything is running on back of another. A common application can be email authentication service. So for that, you have another backend code running again on batch on a batch app over App Engine, and it's actually executing everything on the Cloud SQL. So Memcache is a smarter way of storing cached files on your backend code. Usually you have to write your own service worker if you want to store that. But in case if you are using App Engine, then you can use and leverage Memcache that stores the query so that your code doesn't need to execute again and again. So you would probably ask, Aman, what is the difference between these two versus this one versus this one? So this one is totally unmanaged service, which means you have to configure everything. And this is serverless, which means that there is no server involved over here. It automatically scales ups and downs according to the usage. This can also do the same thing, but the VM compute engine has to be configured by you. Here you don't need to configure the VM. Common example of the architecture. So with that, this is the end of Google Cloud. If you have any questions, do let me know. Okay, let's go ahead with Azure. So again, no need for introduction. Again, a cloud service package in a different format helps you run your application. So these are the plethora of services that it provides. Again, it has a compute corner, so you can have virtual machines and containers. These are their data centers, and then they have configured everything on top of it. For storage, you have blob storage, Azure Files, and premium storage. And for networking, you have virtual network, domain name system, DNS, load balancers. Same as all other services, nothing much interesting. For data, you have SQL databases. Document DB, again, a NoSQL database. For analytics, you can have Hadoop. You have CDN. Just going around and seeing what are the common applications that other people provide. Azure Active Directory, this is important one that we'll discuss. Compute, you have Service Fabric, which is the app fabric. You have cloud services, web apps, APIs, API management. You can directly do things with Visual Studio Code. And this is not important. So all the highlighted one we'll discuss one by one about them. And these were the common applications that you saw across different cloud providers. So first one is virtual machine. Virtual machine is exactly as its name suggests. It's VMs which you can boot from a wide variety of different ISO images that are available, and you can host your application on top of it. So I also have, by the way, Twimbit uses Azure Cloud Services for some aspects. I can't reveal them. So let's go to portal.azure.com. So this is how the interface looks like. Similar to some kind of Google Cloud Services, you have your account. Again, for Azure services, you need a Microsoft account. I don't know why they do these things, but you actually need a Microsoft account. Then you can search all the services from here, and all of the services are available in a nicely aligned manner over on the left. So there are not a lot of confusing things over there, but sometimes if you need more detailed services, you can obviously search them out. So the first one was virtual machines. So virtual machine, as its name suggests, it's a virtual way of launching your machines on top of the cloud services that they are providing. So you can go ahead, create a new virtual machine, choose for which subscription you want. Okay, my free trial has expired, so I can't do that. So Microsoft Azure is also a postpaid plan. It gives you around 15,000 credits, Indian rupees credit to be utilized. I have already utilized them. So you can also go ahead and launch your instance on this thing and start using it. So the basic things that we use is again availability, where you want to launch your this server, which image, which operating system you want to launch, how much storage you want to give it to. If you want any authentication, you want password authentication or SSH authentication, you can do that. And then you can choose for next step is disk, how much hard disk you need, how much, this is like the basic disk. Then you can add more blob storage to it. Then networking, which domain you want this to point to, who has to manage these things, some advanced settings. Tags is a fancy way of organizing all those machines depending upon different projects. And then when you are ready, just review and create. Obviously we cannot create because we don't have payment options available. So this is how our virtual machines look like. And here is how traffic is routed. Again, we'll see how a DNS is resolving that request. A public IP address goes to VM, and then the VM can go and check data from different databases and execute the command. Then you have SQL databases, nothing to introduce about. Manage SQL relational database from one to one unlimited place like things. So they say that their SQL runs, this is the only service provider that runs SQL on cloud. So the same flexibility that you have with other cloud services, you can increase and decrease the SQL as the database that you want on cloud, depending upon the tuning algorithm that you provide. So let's go ahead and check out SQL databases ourselves. You can go inside there, create a SQL database. What it will ask you is, of course, for payment. This was weird. Then you can choose for a server. If you want, you can create a new server. SQL also runs on top of a server, so you can choose over here which server you want to choose in. You can name the database, and then you are ready to go. You can provide a IP address, Elastic Pool IP address from it. Then networking, you can assign endpoints from which you want to hit this SQL database, and that's it. So nothing again to to do more about. Then Azure Active Directory Domain Services. This is exactly how IAM works inside Google Cloud or AWS. So this Azure Active Directory Domain Services is a fancy way of managing the cloud services. But on top of it, Microsoft has been providing these services for a very long time. So all the settings that you have on enterprise level applications, starting from your office setups and everything, can be migrated inside Azure Cloud. So this is what Azure Active Directory actually means. You would probably never use it. You just need to know it, that the management of all these things actually goes inside Azure Active Directory services. And here is our Azure Active Directory services, where you can create groups of people who can do different jobs. You can add a new tenant, delete a new tenant, things that you have users, groups, just different ways by which you can organize. Now you'll be able to see that all my users that Quimbit uses Office 365. So all users that were inside my Office 365 are also imported inside as Microsoft Azure Cloud, because Office 365 is also running on top of Azure Cloud Services. So that is what actually it means when we say Azure Active Directory migrates your Office 365 settings into cloud. That's it. And then you have Azure App Services, just like this. Again, it's a managed app services where you can write serverless code without worrying about application usage. And one thing I like most about Azure App Services is that it comes with a lot of already existing application configuration. So you can just go inside there. You can launch a Docker container if you want. You can have your runtime depending upon which application you want to run. Pretty much same like how did we saw inside the Google App Engine. So for example, if you are running WordPress, you will probably choose PHP. If you want, you can choose for a plan or create a new plan, how much RAM you want to give it to, and then it is also auto scaling. And once you are done, you just hit the next button and your app is ready to go without worrying about the instance or anything. So every service these days provides a app engine solution without worrying about cloud and all that. So kind of a managed hosting solution. So you can run web apps, mobile apps, API apps, and logic apps. I don't know much about logic apps myself. I think it's much more trigger driven applications like Lambda that we saw. So Azure App Services is the way to do all these things. Then you have Azure Storage Architecture, which helps you store different kind of files. They have 4 different types of file storage. One is called Queue Storage, which is also utilized by Office 365 Outlook account for storing your emails, much like how you actually store individual content parcel services. That is actually inside the Queue Storage service. Then you have table storage, normally NoSQL kind of format of storing data. Then you have block storage, which is files, static storage hosting, and then you have file storage again, which is same like block storage, but in a much more dynamic format. So this is the layer that they provide. So it's differentiated between front end. This is how it is visible over there. Then it's partitioned. It's overall infrastructure for you on these services. So let's go ahead inside Azure and create a storage on our side. So if you don't find a feature, just start searching storage. Yeah, storage accounts, I guess. So you create a new storage account. So you can store up to 500 terabytes of data, and also you can store NoSQL data files. It takes a little bit of time. And then again, when you create a storage account, you can create multiple buckets like we saw in AWS and Google Cloud. Same as over here, no difference. So I'll just skip this part again. So this is, last thing I forgot, I think I haven't covered in this. Yeah. How do you manage domain network in AWS? In Google Azure? It's really confusing for me. I'm really sorry that I'm moving around too fast between these services that now I'm confused with the names. So yeah, let me take some deep breaths and get back to this. So for DNS management, just go and search for DNS. You have your own DNS zones where you can add your A names, DNS records, C names, TXT records, all the things that we learned about records, you can do it over here. Then if you want to customize the network, you can have virtual networks which will redirect your traffic from different things. Then if you want balancing between different things, you have load balancers, no problem. So pretty much the names of these services are same across Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS. So with that, let me show you a sample architecture of an app, how you will host a full stack app. You have your Azure DNS, which is routing your application, something like www.something.com. So when people come to this, Azure DNS redirects this traffic to Azure Cloud. Then if you want to have authentication, you can have Azure Active Directory to authenticate your app. This goes inside app service or web app. Now you know that this is a serverless format of writing code. There is no server involved in this. You can choose for the plan that you want, service plan that you want. You can have static storage of files that is getting accessed by it. Then you have your own SQL databases, Azure Cloud SQL databases. So this is how a sample web application can run like on Azure. So let me remember if I have anything else. Let's go ahead, and I have never done this thing, but you might be wondering what is the difference then between Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS. So let's go ahead and see what is the first result that comes. Google Cloud versus AWS versus Azure. This is, I think, the most talked about thing. Yeah, let's go with the first one. So AWS is marked as the ability to execute on top. So you see all of them are categorized as leaders, right? I don't know why, like this is a very, I think, race of the century. So you have pros and cons, guys. You can go yourself and check them out. So, everything is almost same. They call EC2 in AWS and virtual machines in Microsoft Azure and Compute Engine in Google Cloud. Then what was else? So here, like everything is same around if you move around the world. Just be open about trying everything out at least once on one cloud service. This gives you confidence, the decisive power. And once you're confident with if pricing suits you, then just go with that service. Personally, I have used all these services. So this is my personal opinion, nothing to, kind of what they are saying. So for big, large scale application where storage is important, AWS, because it's cheap and easy to execute. For data science applications, Google Cloud, because they have everything built on top of their own infrastructure, which utilize a lot of machine learning. If you want to do something on microservice architecture, where execution at scale matters to you, then do it on Azure. If you want simplicity, bootstrapped application, or kind of staging, go with AWS, DigitalOcean Droplets, DigitalOcean environment, right? And then finally, if you are just kind of tired from all these services, want simplicity, just go with any cPanel managed service. That will be fine. And once you know about everything, you can just migrate your service back. Nobody has a lockdown that if you create an application on their environment, you cannot move anywhere else. It's super simple to migrate service from one cloud to another. And there are managed services for that also. And also the incoming service provider gives you the choice to have free of cost inside migration. So never worry about moving from one cloud services to another. Just go with whatever you think is the best right now. And then with the coming years, you will find the best cloud solution. Okay, so with that, this is the end and this is the last slide of our whole 7 days course.